Mr. President, I rise today to speak about one of the greatest honors and privileges that we enjoy here in the United States Senate. As outlined in Article 2, Section 2 of the Constitution, one of the real honors of serving here in the United States Senate is the opportunity to offer advice and consent for nominees to the United States Supreme Court. These are lifetime appointments. 9 individuals throughout most of our history determine the balance that we keep between 3 branches of government. It's so important, and this body has historically treated it in such a solemn manner that in over 230 years of our history, no nominee to the United States Supreme Court has ever been denied a seat through the use of a partisan filibuster. Unfortunately, right now, colleagues from the other side of the aisle are threatening that very precedent. As I said on the floor earlier this year, President Donald Trump promised the American people he would nominate an unwavering supporter of the Constitution to fill the vacancy left by the late Justice Scalia. Well, this president has kept his promise. He's nominated somebody that was actually confirmed here in the United States Senate not that long ago by a voice vote by members who are still here in the United States Senate, many of them. This was a nomination to the 10th Circuit, a role that this man, the nominee, filled with great honor and much distinction. Judge Neil Gorsuch's record of service lives up to the highest standards for a federal judge. His academic and legal records are impeccable. He has demonstrated a keen understanding and appreciation for the rule of law. And he spoke so articulately in hour after hour of interrogation, actually, in his confirmation hearing just last week. Most importantly, Mr. President, Judge Gorsuch has repeatedly demonstrated his commitment to the Constitution and to our founding principles of economic opportunity, fiscal responsibility, limited government, and most important, individual liberty. His testimony last week before the United States Senate Judiciary Committee was masterful. It absolutely convinced me that he's the man for this job. Judge Gorsuch listened to questions carefully, responded thoughtfully, and he gave an indication into his own demeanor that he would use in the United States Supreme Court. Judge Gorsuch listened to questions carefully. Over and over, he illustrated the ability to show a balance of judgment, which is what we look for in a lifetime appointment like this. He made it abundantly clear that the role of the judicial branch is to interpret, not to make law, but to interpret the law. In my own individual meeting with Judge Gorsuch, these same qualities stood out. I was very impressed with his disarming nature and the ability to talk about issues without necessarily showing bias of his own opinion. Because of all this, I know he will serve as a justice in the mold of Justice Scalia, that is, as a balanced judiciary member. Mr. President, I should also point out that this is not a partisan viewpoint, but conservatives and liberals have come out in support of Judge Gorsuch's confirmation over and over through the past week since his nomination. Neil Katyal, who served as acting Solicitor General under former President Obama, as a matter of fact, has described Judge Gorsuch as, and I quote, an extraordinary judge and man, unquote. The American Bar Association, which many members of this body hold as a gold standard for judicial nominees, actually gave Judge Gorsuch its highest rating, something they don't do very often. It did so unanimously also, by the way. Mr. President, those who know Judge Gorsuch best, regardless of their political persuasion, have offered ample praise and abiding respect for this well-qualified nominee. If confirmed, I have full faith that Judge Gorsuch's rulings will be just and rooted in the letter of the law. But, Mr. President, this nomination and confirmation right now comes at a time in the history of this republic that is absolutely crucial that we have a balanced jurist as the 9th member of this Supreme Court. Jonathan Turley, a constitutional law professor at George Washington University right here in Washington, says that this past administration has created a constitutional crisis, the likes of which our country has never seen. Professor Turley talks about how a president now has shown future presidents a new precedent of how to run the government without Congress by blocking the Senate and actually creating the fourth arm of government, the regulators. I think this is a time in the history of our republic that we have to reestablish the balance between the three powers: the legislative underreach, the executive overreach, and now the establishment that rules coming from regulators have every much the same weight as laws produced right here behind debate in the United States Senate and the United States Congress. This is a time we have to have a jurist that will bring a balanced view for all Americans to be represented in the United States Supreme Court. I'm proud to have the opportunity to support this nominee. I urge my colleagues in the Senate to put partisan interests aside, to put the best interests of the country first, and to confirm Neil Gorsuch as the next Justice of the Supreme Court. Mr. President, I take this as a huge, huge privilege to speak out today, and I will speak more next week on the history of this nomination. And I thank you for the opportunity to speak, and I yield my time.